Hello, hello. We're back again for another IGDN panel on a topic of the industry. Tonight, I am joined by Jacqueline Brick as a creator, contributor to Archon and After the War and a LARPer. And I'm also here with Evan Torner, who is a LARPer, not surprised, and also does stuff with Golden Cobra, is behind the scenes for Games on Demand. So welcome to you both. Welcome to this little panel that we've convened.
I regret to inform you that I did not contribute to Archon. It is a wonderful book, but I had no
Oh,
hand in that. I am just friends with the developer. I do, however, have a LARP production company called Ruffled Feathers LLC.
there you go. Definitely. I misremembered from the last time I talked to you. I remembered the After the War part. So I apologize for that.
It's easy to remember because Jax is extremely prolific, and so
I
this is
try.
yes.
And Evan has a cool hat.
That's what I do.
That's right.
Excellent. So, having identified myself to you previous to the call as someone who does not consider myself to LARP, I have to ask you, what are your bona fides in the industry? What kind of LARPs do you do? I've seen pictures. I've talked to some of you about it, but tell me and the people watching this video what you do that makes you a LARPer.
Well, see, I put on a costume and I'm in a room and I am role playing in a live action style.
There you go.
I add somatic components to my role playing. There's your scholarly element.
I mean, that's a good scholarly word. I like it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess the definition of LARP is it's just embodied role play with like two or more people. That's all, right? And you can also solo LARP too. So like,
Totally can.
there's no reason why that definition even has to stick.
One of my favorite solo LARPs is the now out of print Arabelle did one, which was almost a journaling version of Bluebeard's Bride, where
Okay.
you left different notes to yourself about what occurred in different rooms in a house.
Yeah.
That
So
was a really fun one.
so
I think it was called Mr. Smith Used to Live Here. It was really good.
so is that really I mean, obviously there's what is a game even, right? We could take it all the way down to like and analyze all the parts, but like I really like this idea of any sort of embodied role playing, and I'm doing a binge this year of like solo games and doing a lot of journaling in character, and I guess that sort of like is on the edge of that sort of like embodied role playing,
Mhm.
like you mentioned. But does that, like, that feels like different though somehow than this thing that is live action role playing.
So I think what you're struggling with, and Evan could probably back me up on this, a lot of tabletop players seem to think of LARP as a single activity rather than a medium. So if
Hmm,
someone says they are a LARPer, everybody has this idea of what a LARPer is in their head, and it's usually a boffer LARPer. It's
right.
usually someone who is swinging swords and calling damage. But we've expanded that in a lot of ways in the past couple of decades, which I'm thrilled about. And LARPing is a medium. It is not, it's not like the SCA is a LARP, but LARPing is not the SCA, if that makes sense.
Right, they're different. It's the
I'm
different parts of the Venn diagram.
It's like what is table if I were to ask you what is tabletop role playing, how would you define that to me?
I mean, it's like storytelling with rules, basically, I think is the definition that pops out of my head, right?
Okay,
It's
so how does that make that any different than Baron Munchausen? Would you
no, that
consider
is.
Baron Munchausen a tabletop role playing game?
Oh yeah, because there's rules.
Okay, I know a lot of people who wouldn't.
Well, I'm sure.
Would you consider Exquisite Corpse a tabletop role playing game?
I haven't played that one, so I don't know. Is that
It's a shame
the
you should.
I I've got a couple of notes on this. I will back up the statement that LARP is a medium.
yeah.
One is that adult pretend play
Mm-hmm.
predates theater. Theater was like a unique sort of Greek form of like other forms of adult pretend play, often found in ritualistic contexts thousands of years before the Greeks were doing the theater. So it's like a fundamental thing for humans to do. LARPers then, like, LARP has only really been around with us like officially around the world since like 1979, and I don't want to get into who created LARP, but what I do want to say is that if you can LARP, then you can also probably do escape rooms. You can probably do participatory theater. You can probably do VR theater and other forms. It's like this. If you understand the medium of LARP, there's a lot of other adult pretend play activities that either draw from or are adjacent to that. And third, and this is my other note, just like a medium like television, right? You know, it's got its strengths and its weaknesses, and an affinity I think it really has with tabletop role playing is that LARPs benefit from strong situation design, which is to say, you are in a social situation that's legible to you. The default of LARP is terrible. It's an awful, awkward party. You all have a character. I'm a werewolf. You know, Jax is a vampire. Matthew, you're a fairy,
breaking my heart. I'm so burned out on vampires, Evan.
Now we're going to stand here and be awkward and do nothing because I got secrets and I don't want to share them with you. I don't want to share them with either of you. Yeah, you got to be sad and you know, angsty. But the truth is that if your social situation is not strong, like again, school, court, getting to meet people for the first time, speed dating, even
debutante ball, if you want to think of like Bridgerton, that's a good one.
So you've got something that then people can really seize on from their own social experience. Then the embodiment comes more easily. You don't. So even though LARPing has these like deep roots in human interaction, we still need the social scripts to get into it. And that's where, you know, I think tabletop can go a little more gonzo, because they'll say, take a social situation like you meet in a tavern and then be like, you know, like the alcohol on fire, or things that you can't really do in an embodied setting. And with LARP, it's different, I think.
Oh, no, I love everything that you've said. And I want to come back to the word can in a minute, but I just to pick up on that idea, like that about the social situation, like so much of what a typical RPG session does isn't a social situation. It's like we're walking down a hallway and checking doors, or we're we're organizing for an event because we're doing all the planning stuff, where we got to go to X place and get X thing to bring it together for the concert, and then like the concert is like a die roll at the end to see whether people enjoyed it or not. But like,
wow, you need to be playing different tabletops.
Well, but if your game is like a heist type game, it's all about the planning, not the execution. I'm being hyperbolic for dramatic effect, but like so I just picking up on that thing is like the difference is that you've got the social structure, like whereas open world TTRPGs, you just wander around and, you know, find, you know, things to murder in the woods or whatever. You know, it's almost an antisocial situation. So many tabletop RPGs.
I would argue that LARP is, you are doing the heist, but you are also executing the heist. And in some LARPs, it's right after the heist, and now you have to deal with the fallout of the heist, and the heist is told to you in backstory. There's a lot of ways to approach that, but I really want to lean into something that Evan said, which is the social situation, and people have ties to each other that may be positive or negative. For me personally, honestly, in my tabletops as well as my LARPs, I like to have 3 factions, or they don't even have to be like actual factions. They just have to be like this group of people, this group of people, this group of people, and they have common goals, or maybe not so common goals, but like they know who their people are, so there are always people they can come back to. Because in a tabletop, if you're playing something like the industry hegemonic standard like D&D, you have these 5 people at a table who are the people you are always coming back to, or you have a couple NPCs you're always coming back to. And in LARP, that can be harder because you don't necessarily have a central table with a central GM to try to figure that out. So having people that you can rely on and bounce things off of in LARP is actually really useful and important, and mirrors a lot of other art forms, as Evan said. Like even social dancing is a great art form, and I know some LARPs actually use social dancing as a mechanic because of the way we sort of lean into people and like follow or lead people through different scenes.
Great. I love everything you said. I have no follow-ups.
Great.
Evan, you guys.
Yeah, no, I mean, one thing that got me into LARPing to begin with, and I hate this may be changing the subject a little bit, but you know, the was the demographics. I remember going to like a gaming convention. It was GammaCon in Iowa City in the 90s, and it was held in a National Guard armory where you had like a ground floor with all the board game and TTRPG tables, and then they actually had like a conference room above the floor, you know, in a cool like military base fashion, and that's where the LARPs were held. And even as a teenager, when I was playing, you know, often like a game of GURPS or something with people down on the floor, I noticed, wow, there are a lot of like women with frilly dresses like up there. There are no women down here, right? And so like as somebody who, you know, from elementary school on was always forming groups which had gender balance, that then when I got into the convention scene, and I'm like, oh man, this is like male gatekeeping 101. This sucks. And I found like board gaming was like 90% men, and tabletop RPGs like 80% men, and it was only in LARP that I felt like it's 50-50. And not only that, but they're like queer people here. And you know, sort of the baseline for entry really was like, do you feel comfortable embodying a character and or dressing up? And that you know, that was the baseline for entry, and that actually helped not gatekeep. It actually said, if you're cool with this, then you are welcome here to do this.
I'm also really glad you brought that up, because for me, being the femmist person in the room is one of my favorite things. I often joke that I just happen to pick up the hobbies that are shared by, you know, crusty 50-year-old men who smell funny, and like I am the only woman in the room. And that happens a lot because I like to play. There's several D&D heartbreakers that I love to pieces that I've run at Gen Con before. Sat down at a table. It's all dudes old enough to be my dad. And they're like, you're our GM. And I'm like, I'm your GM, bitches. Let's go. And sometimes it's nice to just be surrounded by people who are as excited about the aesthetics and the embodied personhood of what you are doing as you are, rather than it being a surprise that being sort of expected, if that makes sense.
And you really kind of have to be comfortable with your body at a certain point, right?
Well,
and you're kind of
this is what I want to pick up on. You can finish your statement, but I'm
no
flagging in.
And it's reciprocal, so that like you kind of have to be comfortable with your body to join LARPing, but then LARPing lets you explore your body. And then you learn new things about yourself. And so again, a famous
explore your body in LARPing.
Well, I mean, you know, just a small data point. We ran, you know, Just a Little Lovin', a queer LARP in 2017, and it had like 50 players, and out of that, then 8 of them have transitioned, at least gender transition since then. Now you could say, oh, it's a queer LARP, that's self-selecting. And on the other hand, you think, no, people got to explore in this space, embodied over several days, you know, something that they couldn't ordinarily do, and there's precious few spaces that grant that ability. So there's a liberating quality of being able to just you know, you use your body to tell stories, that then you find out all kinds of things about yourself you didn't even know.
Well, and I think this is such a big thing, and I want to go back to those demographics, and also back to the word can. You Evan used a word at the beginning of your description about like, if you can LARP, you can do all these other things. And so picking up on that word, like, what does it take to be able to LARP in the first place? I think some of what you're talking about like being comfortable enough to not know what's going to happen next, totally, or to be able to interact with people, you know, in a room and standing around and moving. And so like, I think people who aren't those things, who aren't comfortable in that way, they don't want to explore further. They're like, well, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to play this like game of push and train dice around a board. And they don't. And so I think that relates to the demographics, right?
I
you
would
mentioned.
actually argue that there are a lot of socially anxious people and a lot of people on both the autism and ADHD spectrums, many of whom are my friends, who have joined LARP because it gives you a very specific set of social scripts. It doesn't matter if the character is pre-written. Some LARPs have pre-written characters. It doesn't matter if you're creating your own character. People will self-select for the LARP that causes them to be the most comfortable in their social and power scripts. I have a friend who has trouble with like really improv heavy mechanics light LARPs because he enjoys telling stories through mechanics. Like he enjoys using the mechanic to explain the character and explain the character's choices. And there are LARPs that allow you to do that, and that's great. I get really hung up on LARPs like Vampire the Masquerade because while you can use the mechanics to tell a story, I feel the mechanics get in the way of the story and the way I want to tell my story. So I tend to go for more rules light or more embodied rules. So like a lot of my LARPs have a lot of the LARPs I design have rules like, oh, you're going to, in order to do this thing, you have to cook this part of a meal for someone, or in order to get gossip from someone on a higher tier of society, you have to help them change into or out of a piece of outerwear in a private room while they monologue at you. And that's the sort of situationship I enjoy being involved in. And people will
Situationship?
yeah,
That's-
it's okay, so it's a
is
slang
that
term for basically like I'm in a romantic relationship with this person, but only under these circumstances.
okay?
It's basically
That's what it sounded like, but I
yeah,
wasn't. Yeah. Okay.
it's basically like if somebody who was raised monogamous heard the term comet and was like, I don't like that term. I want it to be this term. I'm like, all right, sure, fine. I understand what that means. But like I said, people are going to self-select for the mechanics that feel like the script they want to follow, which is why you will find so many neurodivergent people who may not be comfortable at even a board game table or at a tabletop table because there is this script for, I don't know, what to do with your hands or what you can do in this specific instance or when you open this envelope at this time.
Yeah, I mean that's an excellent point because it's certainly it has its own script or its own norms when you're sitting at the board game table, and yeah, like you can't. It is not encouraged for you to get up and walk around while you're doing that activity, but it might be perfect.
Some people really like getting up and walking around. It's a stim, it's a way of
Yeah.
handling stuff. And like for me, I know I really enjoy dramatically pacing in LARPs, and like sometimes I will look for LARPs that allow me to indulge that. I do a phenomenal angry walk. When I am allowed to do angry walks, everybody in the LARP is going to look at me. So I am going to look for a LARP that will allow me to, in heels or boots, storm across a room. Because it's fun for me. And because I know I and other people are going to enjoy it. And that's not exactly a mechanic, right? Unless it's
No.
written in, because I did get to see a West Wing LARP run at Midwinter a couple years ago where they had to do the Aaron Sorkin walk and talk as a mechanic, and it was phenomenal because I was sitting at the front of the dealer's hall with one of my partners, and we were just going, oh, there they go. They're making important decisions. And there they go. So, like, I don't enjoy the West Wing, so I'm not going to play in the West Wing LARP, even though it allows me to walk and talk or possibly angry walk and talk. But I am going to play a LARP that, while it may not have angry walking as a mechanic, will allow me to do that as part of the gameplay.
It makes perfect sense. It does. It makes perfect sense. And so I kind of want to build on that and ask you both, like, what are some, like, you've named some specific LARPs already, but what are some that like give something you, I don't know, like start with ones that we like, the ones that you like, and then maybe some that like you would encourage other people to try if they haven't LARPed, or, you know, so because I imagine the experience, you know, you're looking for that very specific thing. Like that is a specific need that a game can fill. I am wanting to walk angrily, that that, you know, not every game fulfills that one. So like, but like to know that that's what you want, you probably have to play a few first. So start with ones that you, at a high level, like which ones do you like, and then maybe we'll go and we'll name a couple that are like more accessible for starters.
I'm gonna let Evan go first because I've been talking a whole bunch.
Let's see here. Yeah, I was writing down all my LARP fetishes, but I'm gonna move on and say the two I usually recommend as intro LARPs are both written by Wendy Gorman. One is co-authored actually with Heather Silsby. I think David Hertz. Is called Still Life. There you are playing rocks in a garden, a rock garden. You know, one of you is pumice, one of you is limestone. You have like a little question, and you mostly just sit there, and you know, if you roll next to another person, then you can talk to them. By another person, I mean another rock, and you just you then get manipulated by elemental forces. Sometimes, you know, some rainstorm washes you into a river, and then the game master will move you slightly over to a different part of the room. And it's very zen, but it also engages with the basics of embodiment and of social interaction, and it gives you a story arc. Quite, you know, you don't need a lot of pre-written anything to have something quote unquote happen to your character. You can stop playing as soon as you feel like your character has an answer to their question, at which point they just sort of stand up and announce that. So then your story is public. It isn't just, I mean, well, we have a concept in LARPing called first person audience, where, you know, your story is for you primarily, so you don't need to act for anybody. It's all it really is for you. But you know, for Still Life, there is some cheating outward. The other one that I have my students play is called We're All Roommates Now, also by Wendy Gorman. These are both Golden Cobra games, by the way. It's the universe I live in. We Are All Roommates Now is just 2 pages. One is for the humans, and one is for this alien species that is going to have to cohabit with the humans, and they have extremely different, weird specifications for the roommate contract. The goal is just for them to make a roommate contract, but of course, you know, they might find your gerbils edible, and we might find, you know, that we don't understand what a zickeltix is, and so on and so forth. And again, no one has to take on real character, but then people do evolve characters out of sort of these out of these 2 factions, and then of course they have to come to an agreement in a plausible social situation. Again, that strong situation design, but then you know, often it's in the details, right? Where you think the agreement's going to happen, then it blows off. And of course, those of us who are like more sociologically minded always are looking at that. Like LARP rights are always looking at social situations, like what are the hidden rules, what happens when you inject this thing in, what are the emergent properties of it. And you know, I think that's a good instinct to have, especially in reading. You know, reading for your next LARP, you're kind of reading other people, reading situations, reading, of course, also fiction, but then, you know, kind of saying, if I gave humans to do this activity, what would they do? And how would it then emerge in a way that I could then control it to do this next thing, right? And you know, that's how we're often designing these things.
I'm gonna pick some from Golden. I'm gonna actually pick 2 from Golden Cobra as well, because I think Golden Cobra is great for beginner LARPers who just want to try something, because Golden Cobra LARPs tend to be bite-sized and incredibly dramatic, and I think one of the worst things you could possibly do to a new LARPer is baby them. Because new LARPers will often come up with these incredible ideas that we hadn't thought of before. and inject, as Evan said, inject newness into the social situation. I will be very quick about this because it looks like we have about 5 minutes left.
We'll just start another one. It's fine. Just keep going.
Okay. I mean, I'm good with ending at the end of this one, but whatever works for you. The first one is Burial in Ash by Sadia Bias. It is a very quiet apocalypse. It's a game about a world that is slowly being buried in ash, and you're not really sure why. Why is not the important part. And some of your friends are ghosts and some of you are still alive, and the ghosts will start repeating phrases, and essentially you have to make your last night together count before you're all suffocated by this ash that is slowly consuming you. The other one, and it's gonna take me a minute to find it because I should have brought it up before I did, but that's okay. As We Know It by Alex Carlson is written for 4 people in 4 closets with 4 cell phones. I actually have updated it so it uses Discord rules instead, which I find a lot easier because you can just switch people in and out of different channels. But it is a game where you're all in hiding from aliens that have conquered the earth, and you're not sure what they want to do with you, and you haven't seen the aliens necessarily. It's kind of a Cloverfield situation.
All right.
But like you're all trying to survive, and you have no idea if the channel is being run by aliens or not because all comms have been down until your phone opened a line to someone else. It is a phenomenal game of feelings of paranoia, especially when you get like 15, 20. The original game is for 4 players. When you get 15, 20 players and you're switching them through different Discord channels and you're playing online, they get real freaked out, especially if you start adding sound effects. It's really fun. Strongly recommend it. Basically no overhead to run at all. Phenomenal game. Wish it was played more.
Well, maybe
and
now it will be.
If I want to suggest an old school game that comes out of the Nordic countries, and I have a whole rant about how the term Nordic LARP basically doesn't mean anything anymore, and has become a marketing term, but that's something we can save for a future panel. Screwing the Crew is the LARP that actually got me interested into LARPs that weren't Boffer, because I hadn't played any LARPs that weren't Boffer or Vampire at that time. And the idea that you could just have this LARP about a bunch of exes and polyamorous people and people experimenting, etc., all getting drunk at a table together, and the drama is just gonna come out somehow, was really fun. And I think a lot of my design principles I sort of get from that very tense, intimate social space that's created in that game.
Excellent. That is a great starting list. We'll put the links to all those in the video. Cycling the recording. I think you're giving us a 4 games to introduce the concept really well. But if somebody is like, great, I'm already at that level, and I kind of am asking 2 things here. What are some other games? But also, like, I want to hear like your stories of like, this is my favorite moment. This is the thing I live for. This is why I do it, is because of this that happened. Like, what is that for you? And then maybe what game that happened in, so that people can see other games to go for beyond the initial games that you've already named. Did I ask an actual question? I'm sorry. Do you understand what I...
Try so many games.
I mean, that's just good advice.
Like even here, you are going to be tempted to be like, I only play this kind of game, or I only play this kind of game. And I know a lot of people who have been LARPing for many years who've decided that no, they only want to play one specific kind of game, and that's fine. When you are getting into LARPing, you want to try stuff out, and some of that stuff is not going to be for you. I am never going back to a Northern New Jersey Boffer LARP. Ever. Can't make me. I will go to a Boffer LARP in Rochester, New York. Fine. I will go to a Boffer LARP in North Carolina. Fine, but I prefer to NPC. What you really want to do is start sort of, figure out which cultures you like, which subcultures of LARPing, what your friends are playing. at this point, once you've started doing LARP 101, this is when I would start asking your LARPer friends for recommendations, seeing what games they go to, what games they want to go to, what games they avoid. Like,
It's almost as
LARP,
important, I imagine.
it really is. And LARP, like tabletop, is best spread by word of mouth and experimentation. So when Evan may have some specific recommendations, I don't. Mine are mostly go to cons, try out cons, LARPs at cons that specifically have a LARP track and are not necessarily like an anime con with a 24-hour LARP. Because that can be really stressful.
Sure.
And I don't super recommend that. But try stuff out. See what works for you.
I'm a big fan of ship LARPs, and just because like that's a situation I like to be in. I like to have like a defined role, and it's like a job, and like if I don't do my job, the ship crashes, right? This kind of absolute affirmation of me as a serious person, right? And the ship LARP I'm currently working on with about 80 other people is one called Odysseus. You can find the trailer for it. It's a Finnish LARP in June of 2024, where
breathing heavily into the microphone. Tell me more. Tell me more.
They're basically transforming an entire elementary school into a ship, and they'll be able to leave this scenography up for about a month, and so I think there's at least 3 international runs. So one of the design principles with this LARP is what we call a clockwork LARP, right? So it's loosely based on that Battlestar Galactica episode where there's always the ship that jumps every, they have to keep jumping every, I forget the interval of time. It's like 2 hours or something.
Monitor
like that.
Celestra did that too, didn't they?
Yes, Monitor. This is a Finnish revisioning of the Monitor Celestra.
Nice.
and to some degree with the Finns on the project, and again, it's a primarily woman-led project.
Yes.
that is very serious about the different parts of the LARP feeding into each other, so that nobody feels like they're not the main character, even if they're the stowaway. And we're trying to solve those specific design problems, but basically the engineering stuff will feed into the bridge, which will then also trickle out to the passengers, etc. But then there are some other things that will come up, and this is of course to avoid what we call plot snowballing, which is this character over here does some cool thing and everybody kind of gloms onto it, and then their plot lines get like overridden, and their duties get overridden. With a clockwork LARP, like no matter what the hell is happening, if you're a mess cook, you still gotta cook the food, right? And that's gotta still happen somehow. So I think there's a way that what we consider to be the blockbuster LARPs of the last decade are now they're I won't say they're passé in design, but we almost immediately knew all the design problems and have had to be like, look, guys, we can have much more structured kind of experiences, and that structure again will help people who aren't neurotypical, who will help people who need this kind of strong basis on which they can say, well, your embodied fiction is okay, so that then you can actually be free to do things. But what happens when things become a popularity contest or plot snowball is that then you feel like, oh, I don't matter, and that's the last thing you want to have happen in a LARP.
And something I really like about that is because, as you mentioned, like blockbuster style LARPs over the past decade, some of the big issues I've seen are these LARPs are like, oh, we want everyone to be the main character, so everybody's going to pitch their own plots to us, and then we're just going to do it in this very individualistic style instead of everybody being part of a community. And I think that really hurts bigger LARPs. Now, what I'm doing is a 25-person Airbnb LARP about a family in a cannibalism industrial world where, people are growing other
it sounds so much fun.
Yeah, people are growing other humans as food. And that is actually based off of an Argentinian novel, Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica, which rapidly became one of my favorite books over the pandemic. It's a great novel. It's 98 pages. I strongly recommend everyone read it. We're sort of mixing that with Succession, the HBO show, which I also love, and trying very clear to make it that this is not billionaire escapism fantasy. This is a LARP about how capital fucks everyone at every stage. So I'm pretty excited about that. And while it's not a clockwork LARP, it is a LARP where everybody is either in a secret relationship with someone else, or someone else is holding their secrets, or someone else, or they're employed by someone else, or there's
Lots of
just
established connections to then play
Yeah.
out and play on.
So again, it becomes very much a community sort of thing where if you're pulling on one thread, you're pulling on a bunch of other threads. And there are I think, and maybe I am wrong, but I think there are ways to do that without plot snowballing. Especially if everyone is involved, or like a quarter of the LARP is involved in this one thing that is happening, and other people can go take a rest, cook a meal, have the quiet conversation with their lover that they've been trying to have for the past 4 hours. So,
All right. Well, I mean, both of those sound amazing and also sound like a lot of work. So,
Yeah.
good luck to you on bringing those to fruition as you get those things written. I think now is the time to people who've heard you talking, and if they want to know more about what you do, where can they learn more than this video? Because I feel like there's terms that have been mentioned, there's norms that have been talked about. Like, we've only scratched the surface here. As you said, we could do a
We could
whole
do hours
series
on
of
this.
panels on just this thing.
Yeah. And I think we should.
And we
But
well, sure, hey, great. This is just the start. But
yes.
where can people find you, Jacqueline, on the internet if they want to buy your LARPs, play in your LARPs,
Well, I will
find your
tell you,
recommendations for LARPs, find other things you've written, all that stuff?
I will tell you, you will not find me in Archon. It is a wonderful book. Haha,
Again, I
callback joke.
apologize.
No, it's all good. It's all good. You provided me with a wonderful callback joke, which I glommed onto. You should pick up Archon as a wonderful system agnostic cyberpunk game by Kiana Shaw. And it is super beautiful and great to look at, and it occupies a pride of place on my shelf that I put up myself. But you can find me on most social media as Rufflejax. That's RUFFLEJAX. My LARP production company. My LARP production company is Ruffled Feathers LLC. We are currently finishing up casting Head of the Family, which is our LARP based on Tender is the Flesh, the novel I spoke about. Very excited. That will run this September. You can find my LARPs that you can buy and run at your place, both on Itch.io and on DriveThruRPG. I am Rufflejax on Itch.io, and I am Jacqueline Brick, that's BRYK, on DriveThruRPG. I can also be hired to write bespoke LARPs for your event, so please reach out to me on my socials if that is something you are interested in.
Great. That will all be also in the description of the video.
Marvelous.
I guess
Evan.
I do have a website, guyintheblackhat.com, but it's kind of defunct. I have to modify it and update things. So I'll give you some better socials than that. You can find me at guyintheblackhat at dice.camp on the Mastodon network. I can be found on Twitter, but I'm not going to recommend it because that
Twitter
site
bad.
is dying. I just don't. It feels bad to log on there these days.
Sure does.
And then I'm gonna recommend a couple of databases I'm involved with. goldencobra.org. You can find LARPs dating back to 2014, and some of which have become commercially successful products, and others of which are just free and available that you can download as a PDF. That again is a contest that runs every fall. And we look forward to Metatopia maybe ever happening ever again, so we can again announce the awards there like we used to, and run the games there like we used to. My own work is very easily found on a website called alexandria.dk.
It's real good.
Which literally some nerdy Danes for about 20 years have been archiving everything related to LARP, and also tabletop game scenarios run at Danish and now American conventions. So it's a very good back catalog, and you can put your scenarios up there for free, which I do. That's all I'm going to plug here.
Yeah, those are great plugs. That's a lot of stuff to check out, a lot of stuff to learn. If you've watched this video because you had never played a LARP before, congratulations. I hope you're inspired to get into it. If you're an old hand and you've got different opinions, don't put them in the comments, because nobody reads the comments.
True.
Great. Thank you, Jacqueline, for being on this panel. Thank you for your Evan for being on the panel, and go out there and keep playing games.
Play so many games.
Play so many games, because there are so many to play.